Wow, so the NFL roster cutdown deadline has came and went, and the Eagles made some surprising decisions, as not only were there some shocking cuts and notable players that didn't make the team, but there were also a few surprise players that did make the final roster as well. So let's break it all down. And also, speaking of surprise players that made the cut, we finally have a solution to the James Bradberry situation, plus the Eagles also made some shocking decisions regarding a few injured players, including keeping one guy who many thought would not survive final cut. So we're going to talk about that and everything else from a wild day for the Eagles starting right now. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Philly Fan 21 channel. If you're new, I'm Evan and I cover all things Philadelphia Eagles. And let's start off with a notorious Eagles hater giving another insane take, as Nick Wright of FS1's First Things First gave his predictions for how things are going to shake out in the NFC East this year yesterday, and what he said about the Eagles was just absolutely wild.
At number 3 is the Philadelphia Eagles.
Gosh.
They've lost 6 of the last 7 games. They had a bottom 4 defense across the board in the NFL last season. They lost a future Hall of Famer, the leader of their team, the best player on their offense. Their coach and their quarterback don't get along. Their coach was known for one thing, kind of being a jerk on the sidelines, and now he's been like, no, I'm going to stop that. If anyone else could have told him that was a bad idea years ago, classic 2, once again. And all of those things, they come into the season on the hot seat. They have 2 great receivers. I know that. I don't know much else about this football team other than their GM loves the acquisition of, I knew who that guy is. Jahan Dotson? Oh, yeah, I remember him.
He's good.
Oh, is he?
Especially as a third receiver.
Okay. Is he?
As a third
Based on what?
Well, Sam Howell.
Based on what?
You know what? I gotta hand it to Nick Wright, because even though he is hilariously off base here and pretty much just reaching and digging for every single reason why the Eagles could possibly be bad this year, rather than just looking at things for what they are and seeing that the Eagles should clearly be one of the best teams in the league this season just on paper, and also judging by all the recent reports that have come out, but I still gotta give him credit because he knows what makes good TV, he knows how to get a rise out of people, and he knows how to get clicks, and I honestly couldn't care less about what he has to say. I just can't wait to watch the Birds go out this season and prove guys like him wrong. But before they get out on the field, the Birds of course had to finalize their 53-man roster, and things really started to get rolling yesterday when Howie Roseman and the Birds went through their first wave of cuts, with guys like Max Sharping, Austin Watkins, Griffin Hebert, Teron Jackson, Andre Sam, Kevin Folch, Perry Nickerson, Julian Aquara, Will Greer, Sean Stevens, and Jason Poe all being released or waived. And also among the cuts was a former Eagles draft pick that had been here for a number of years in cornerback Zech McPhearson, as the 2021 4th-round pick was officially waived by the team on Monday, and he issued a thank you to the city and team on social media. And you honestly gotta feel bad for McPhearson, who was a really good special teams player for the Birds in 2022 on their run to the Super Bowl, and then in 2023 he probably had his biggest chance to be a legit contributor on the defense, but his season was over before it even started, as he suffered an Achilles tear in the preseason last year and missed the entire season, and this year he really didn't have much of a chance in the Eagles' crowded cornerback room. So now that he's gone, I wish him nothing but the best, and hopefully he lands on a team somewhere and has success, or maybe he could wind up back on the Birds practice squad, who knows. Now, a very interesting development from yesterday was what happened with rookie wide receiver Ainias Smith, as approaching the cutdown deadline, Smith was probably one of the Birds' most interesting players to watch, as after having a really poor start to training camp and preseason and not being a guarantee to make the final roster, Smith is able to bounce back and really start to find his footing, while more than likely securing himself a roster spot in the process. However, it was revealed on Monday by Ian Rappaport that Smith actually had suffered what ended up being a really interesting injury in the Birds' preseason finale, as he said, quote, "Eagles rookie wide receiver Ainias Smith reported discomfort in his ankle and hamstring after completing Saturday's game, sources say. The 5th rounder is getting an MRI and his availability for the start of the season is in some doubt." And this meant that instead of Smith likely taking up a roster spot, he would instead be used to fill one of the Eagles' 2 open IR spots. And this actually ended up having some serious ramifications regarding who actually did end up making the final roster. So more on that later. Now Tuesday, aka roster cutdown day, started off with some more intriguing cuts, with the first one being running back Lou Nichols, who had a solid camp but really never had much of a shot to make the roster. I mean, there were probably 4 guys ahead of him on the depth chart during camp anyways, so he gets waived and best of luck to him. Then the next cut was somebody who I think a lot of Eagles fans, including myself, were really rooting for in the former first-round receiver John Ross, as he was released on Tuesday morning. And it's just really unfortunate because Ross actually had a pretty good camp, and early on it actually seemed like Ross could have been in contention for that 3rd receiver spot, but the other guys kind of outshined him, and he ended up getting hurt in the 2nd preseason game and then being out for the rest of camp. And then the acquisition of Jahan Dotson was really the nail in the coffin often for Ross, so it definitely sucks for him that he couldn't make the roster after earning himself a shot at an NFL comeback, but I think he's definitely a guy to watch out for when the Birds are putting together their practice squad. And I feel similarly about the next guy that the Birds waived in tight end EJ Jenkins, as Jenkins was probably the third best tight end on the roster during camp, and he made some nice plays in the preseason, but as I predicted, he just didn't quite do enough to make the final 53, so we'll see what happens with him. Again, I think if he clears waivers, he'll definitely end up making the practice squad, so watch out for that. But then, a little bit later after that, the Eagles made another somewhat surprising roster move regarding another tight end. And don't worry, we're going to get into that and all the other Eagles roster news from Cutdown Day in just a minute, but real quick, I do want to say, if you are enjoying this video and don't want to miss any Eagles coverage coming this season, then make sure you guys subscribe and also really importantly, turn on notifications so you're notified instantly when one of these videos covering the Eagles is uploaded. I think that's a win-win for the both of us, because not only do I get more people consistently watching these videos, but you don't miss any other Eagles content or coverage just like this. So again, subscribe, turn on notifications, and also drop a like. Let's see if we can hit 800 likes on today's video. Now, with all that being said, let's get back into the video. So as I was saying, the Eagles made a very intriguing roster move regarding another tight end just over an hour before the cutdown deadline, as they placed Albert O on injured reserve after he underwent core muscle repair, meaning that he along with Ainias Smith would take up the Eagles' 2 IR spots currently. And he's also expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks with the injury. And I honestly find this really interesting because Albert O has missed probably the better part of training camp with this injury, and when he was out there practicing, I can't really remember any reports of him making plays or impressing during practice, just being honest. So the fact that they have still chosen to keep him around in the form of using one of their IR spots on him is very interesting, and I think it more than anything shows that Howie Roseman and the coaching staff really believe in him and his ability, despite the fact that he really hasn't done much of anything since arriving here via trade this time last year. So I'm not going to say that I fully agree with it, because again, I think that EJ Jenkins had a really nice training camp and probably made a better case than Albert O to be the tight end number 3, but seems like the Eagles were not ready to give up on Albert O just yet, and he's probably currently on track to be this team's tight end number 3 whenever he returns from injury. But now moving on to another somewhat surprising roster move, shortly after putting Albert O on injured reserve, the Eagles then cut a player who headed into training camp seemed like a surefire bet to make the roster, as they officially released wide receiver Parris Campbell. And this is really interesting because headed into camp, Campbell seemed like the very clear favorite to earn the starting wide receiver 3 job after having an impressive spring with the team, but unfortunately for Campbell, he just can't seem to catch a break with the injuries, which has pretty much been the thing that has limited his success so far in his career, as he got hurt once again during training camp and missed a large amount of time with a groin injury, including the team's first 2 preseason games and the joint practice. And in that time, some of the Eagles' other receivers impressed and earned spots on the team, and then just when Campbell was coming back from the injury, the Birds went ahead and traded for Jahan Dotson, making the wide receiver room that much more crowded, and suddenly, Campbell was in a tough spot and not at all a guarantee to make the roster. Now, I personally thought that the injury to Ainias Smith and his designation to IR may have been what Campbell actually needed to make his way onto the roster, but turns out that's not the case, as the Birds decided to cut him anyway. So I mean, you kind of got to feel bad for him, as once again, an injury has possibly cost him another big opportunity here, which has been the story of his career pretty much. But Campbell is someone who I think the Eagles will try to sign back to the practice squad if another team doesn't come and scoop him up, so that'll definitely be something to monitor. But shortly after this, the deadline came and went, and the Eagles social media team was quick to post a video to inform fans on who had made the final roster, and I'll play that video for you guys right now. So that was definitely cool, but it also went pretty fast, so I'll give you guys the key details or surprises that you may have missed. starting with the fact that James Bradberry is on the final roster, which is really interesting just after the whole situation that's played out throughout the entire offseason, with Bradberry, of course, making the switch to safety after a disappointing season as the starting cornerback last year, and then primarily being a backup at his new position throughout camp and the preseason. And then obviously there were all the rumors of Bradberry possibly being traded or just getting flat out released throughout the entire offseason, but now the deadline has obviously came and went, and then now safety is still here, and Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni both spoke about that decision in their press conference after the deadline.
James always has had really good football instincts. When you see him play safety every day here and see his ability to diagnose his football instincts, I think for all of us that's a transition. That's a different position than playing outside corner. He's got a skill set. It's a long season. We already know that he's had tremendous success in this league playing outside corner as well. And with the goals that we have for this football team, having a veteran player like that on the roster that we know we can rely on when called upon, we felt like it was important.
He's a pro, and he's been a pro ever since he's come into this building. He's led by example. He's led with his play, and guys look up to him.
So it certainly sounds from that like they both liked what they saw from Bradberry during the offseason and throughout this entire process, and he's done everything he possibly could to earn his place on this roster, and it paid off. So I do got to give a shout out to JB, because this whole situation could have been an absolute mess if he had handled it differently, but as JB always does, he handled this situation like an absolute pro. So credit to him, and that's probably been a factor in him staying on the roster as well. That being said, though, it's not as if the Eagles didn't look at other options, as Jeff McClain reported before the deadline that the Eagles called around the league looking to potentially trade James Bradberry, but nothing materialized. So who knows, maybe he gets moved later on, but for now, he's on the team. So again, just shout out to him. And then moving on, one guy who was on the roster bubble that did end up making the final cut was cornerback Eli Ricks, which I called yesterday in my video, so congrats to him. I'm definitely a fan of that, because I do think that Ricks has potential and also has the right attitude to be a successful player in this league, so hopefully he can continue to develop this year. And another defensive back who made it was safety Tristin McCollum, which just was awesome to see, as he's come a really long way since last season, as he looked great in training camp this year and was probably one of the best players in the preseason for the Birds, so he definitely earned his spot as well. And someone else who really earned their spot was defensive tackle Thomas Booker IV, as he's someone that spent last season on the Birds practice squad and came into camp probably as a long shot to make the roster in the public's eyes. I mean, personally, I didn't even have him making the final roster in my prediction from yesterday, so I'll own up to the fact that I was wrong about that, but I also can't argue with him making the roster either, as he was good in the Eagles preseason games, especially that Patriots game where he ended up getting a sack, and according to Howie Roseman, Booker's work ethic is unbelievable, and it's what helped him really develop and fight his way onto the roster this offseason.
This is a guy that if you were here in the offseason, he lived in the facility. Tremendous work ethic, obviously incredibly smart guy, a Stanford guy. He's got all the tools in his body, and just an incredible tribute to him and how hard he worked. And when you watch the tape and you see his get off and his ability to play with leverage, to play with power, to affect the quarterback, to be disruptive around the quarterback in the backfield, to us, it was clear the guy deserved to be on the team. Probably should have said this to him before I said it to you guys, but just really proud of him. It's a great tribute to our development program, and you see a guy with talent, with intangibles, with work ethic, who looked really good, and excited to see what he can do during the regular season.
So just shout out to Thomas Booker for making the final cut, and hopefully he's able to have success in whatever role he has for the Birds this year. And also shout out to offensive lineman Darian Kinnard, who made the team after playing almost every snap for the Birds in their preseason games. He was also someone who was really no guarantee to make the roster, but he fought and worked hard, and it paid off, so congrats to him. Unfortunately, though, Kinnard's inclusion meant that the 6th-round rookie Dylan McMahon didn't make the final cut, so hopefully the Birds are able to get him back on the practice squad, and same goes for linebacker Oren Burks, who didn't make it as well, with Ben Van Sumeren getting the nod over him. And while I do agree with this decision, Burks is someone who I was really impressed with in the preseason finale, so again, hopefully the Birds are able to get him back on the practice squad when it's all said and done. And speaking of the practice squad, the Birds will probably get that filled out within the next couple of days or so, and I'm going to be covering that as well as just all the other Eagles news throughout this entire season. So if you don't want to miss any of that, again, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you're notified instantly when one of these videos is uploaded. And also, while you're at it, make sure you drop a like to show some support on this video and on this channel. It really does help me out a ton. Let's see if we can hit 800 likes today, and also leave a comment down below just regarding anything that I talked about in this video. What are your overall thoughts on the Eagles' decisions in cutting down their roster to 53 guys? And also, if you want to watch another Eagles video, you can check this one out right here. And now with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.